The message had barely left the phone when a cold wave of regret rolled through their stomach. They stared at the screen, the words they now wished they could erase already marked as read. This kind of immediate remorse is not a sign of weakness. It is a signal that the action clashed with who they want to be. But what happens next is not automatic. From this exact same starting point, two friends could end up in two completely different places by nightfall. The most natural assumption is that regret pushes us to make amends. We picture the person taking a deep breath and typing an apology that acknowledges the hurt. Most moral traditions and common sense agree. If you feel bad, you fix it. And sometimes that is exactly what happens. The apology arrives, the friendship bends but does not break, and the tension starts to dissolve. But sometimes the screen stays dark, the apology never comes, and a quiet distance creeps in. The same pang of regret that opens one person's heart seems to lock another person's voice away. Psychologists have spent decades pulling apart two emotions that look similar on the surface, but operate like opposite engines. Those two emotions are guilt and shame. At first glance, they blend together because you feel awful about something you did. But pick them apart, and you find a fork that changes relationships, apologies, and even crime. Shame says, I am bad. Guilt says, I did something bad. It is a shift of just a few words, yet it reroutes the entire future. When someone feels shame, their attention turns inward toward a self that suddenly feels small, exposed, and deeply flawed. The pain is so global that they want to shrink, disappear, or escape the eyes of others. Shame often arrives with a physical urge to hide, a lowered gaze, hunched shoulders, and a wish to be somewhere else. Guilt, in contrast, fixes on the action, not the entire self. It feels like a tight focus on the damage done, the broken trust, the spoken word that cannot be taken back. And that focus on the harm tends to create a pull toward the person who was hurt. Guilt generates empathy, because to feel it deeply, you have to picture the other person's experience. Shame, on the other hand, can crowd empathy out with intense self-concern. Researchers such as June Tangney have shown through careful studies that shame-prone individuals are more likely to deny, hide, or even blame the victim. Guilt-prone individuals, meanwhile, are more likely to confess, apologize, and try to make things right. So the same regret, depending on whether it is colored by shame or guilt, can lead toward repair or retreat. This discovery changes how we understand everything from a silent phone to a courtroom. If shame is always destructive, how do we explain cultures where shame appears to keep people on the right path? So the link between shame and withdrawal is not a universal law. It depends on how shame is practiced and what it signals about possible repair. When shame is paired with an acceptance of the person, when the message is, what you did was disgraceful, but you are still part of us, repair is more likely. When shame is used to cast someone out, the escape impulse takes over. This is one reason that parenting styles matter so much from the earliest years. A child who hears, you are a bad girl, learns to see a bad self. A child who hears, that was a hurtful thing to do, let us figure out how to fix it, learns to separate the action from the self. The words may sound similar, but they build different emotional pathways that last a lifetime. In the laboratory, even small cues can shift a person toward guilt or shame. Reflecting on a wrongdoing while looking at one's own face in a mirror tends to increase shame-like reactions. Reflecting while thinking about the face of the person who was hurt tends to draw out guilt. This reveals something critical. Shame and guilt are not fixed personality traits that you are stuck with forever. But the stakes are high because the behavioral consequences are not just about apologies. Research has linked shame-prone reactions to increased risk of aggression, substance misuse, and depression. When someone cannot bear the feeling of being a bad person, they may attack the source of that feeling or numb it entirely. Guilt, when it remains focused on a specific behavior and does not turn into shame, is associated with healthier relationships and less risky behavior. Yet it is crucial to note that guilt can also become excessive and paralyzing, especially when it spirals into rumination about the bad act without any bridge back to action. That is why the balance between accepting responsibility and maintaining a sense of worth is so delicate. The goal is not to eliminate shame and guilt entirely, because they are part of the human moral compass. The goal is to recognize when shame is hijacking the very repair it pretends to demand. Think back to the friend staring at the sent message. If their internal voice is screaming, "I am such a horrible person, I cannot face them," the odds of an apology drop sharply. Their energy goes into managing the unbearable self-image, not into repairing the relationship. They might avoid the friend for days, rereading the conversation, feeling worse, but doing nothing. This is the hidden trap of shame. The escape from pain blocks the path to feeling better. The fastest way to stop feeling like a bad person is actually to do something good, especially for the person you hurt. But shame convinces you that you are not worthy of that chance. It whispers that hiding is the only safe option. And so the silence deepens, and the other person interprets it as not caring. That misinterpretation fuels more shame, and the cycle locks. Guilt, on the other hand, offers a more hopeful route. Because guilt focuses on the act, the cost is contained. You can still think, "I am a decent person who made a bad choice, and I can choose differently now." That thought is the engine of repair. It takes courage, because apologizing still involves vulnerability, but the self is not being annihilated. The central turning point is not whether you feel bad, it is what that bad feeling is about. A single shift in attention can unlock the courage to cross the distance. Now the friend with the phone still has the screen open. They notice something. The ache in their chest is not just about their own worthlessness. It is also about the hurt in the other person's eyes they can picture clearly. In that moment, the nature of the regret changes. They stop saying to themselves, "I am unforgivable," and start thinking, "I hurt someone who matters to me, and I want to make that right." That is guilt quietly taking the wheel from shame. And the instant that shift happens, the urge to hide loosens. The same memory that felt like a verdict becomes a question, "What can I do now?" This does not mean the feeling is pleasant. Guilt still stings, but its sting has direction. Shame contracts life to a single, unchangeable self. Guilt expands toward a fixable action. The research converges here. Remorse that stays fused to identity tends to drive people apart. Remorse that separates the deed from the doer tends to pull them back together. So the question from the beginning, why can regret produce such opposite behaviors, finds its answer not in the amount of pain, but in the shape of it. This does not erase the difficulty of actually sending that apology. The body still trembles. The words still feel heavy. But the meaning has shifted. It is no longer a confession of total unworthiness. It is an act of responsibility. And it turns out that people who hear a guilt-driven apology often hear more sincerity. Because the person is not drowning in self-loathing, they can actually listen to the hurt they caused. They can stay present for the other person's reaction instead of fleeing. Return now to the opening scene. The message still sits on the screen. The words still hang in the air. The same friend who could have hidden now types very slowly. They write, "I should not have said that. It came from my own frustration, and it was not fair. I am sorry." That simple act does not undo the original blow, but it restores connection. And it builds a different emotional memory for the next time they stumble. They have learned not to erase the mistake, but to separate the mistake from their worth. Skill, more than any single apology, is what carries forward. Because guilt shows you the crack. Shame makes you believe you are the crack.